They say the world was built on the hunger for gold. Not just the metal, but what it promised. Power, recognition, the right to be remembered. People crossed oceans for it. Empires were born and buried because of it. Kings, beggars, and saints alike all bent their knees before its shine. And yet, there was once a woman who looked at gold, looked at the frenzy of the crowd who clawed and bled for it, and simply walked away. Her story is not about wealth. It is about something rarer, something you cannot mine, cannot steal, cannot measure in weight. This is her story, and in it lies a question that will not leave you when the story ends. What if the greatest treasure was not gold at all? The city rose like a crown in the desert. Towers mirrored the sunlight, streets thrummed with trade, and in the center of it all stood the Plaza of Radiance, where the golden idol was displayed once every 10 years. It wasn't just a statue, it wasn't just a relic. To touch it even once was to be granted wealth beyond imagination. Land, power, your family's name written into the records of eternity. So every decade, thousands came, from distant villages, from forgotten kingdoms, from cities where the wind carried the smell of poverty. They came barefoot, broken, hopeful, and desperate. This year, the crowd was larger than ever. Merchants abandoned their shops, soldiers left their posts, farmers left their fields dry. The air tasted of sweat, dust, and feverish anticipation. And in that sea of faces, pressed shoulder to shoulder, was a woman draped in a faded cloak. Nothing about her stood out. Her sandals were worn to the thread, her face sunburned, her hands scarred with the marks of work, but her eyes were steady in a way no one else's were. While others twitched and fidgeted, whispering their strategies to reach the idol first, she stood as if she already knew how this would end. For hours, the sun scorched overhead. For hours, people dreamed of what they would do with the gold, build palaces, command armies, silence their enemies. And when the gates finally opened and the horn sounded, the race began. Men pushed, women clawed, children screamed. The plaza became a storm of bodies. The air filled with the sound of ambition turned savage. The idol gleamed in the distance, golden and blinding. Every step toward it was a step into chaos. But the woman, she did not move toward the gold. She turned and she walked away. The crowd never saw her leave. Why would they? All eyes were fixed on the gleam ahead. Men shoved with elbows sharpened by desperation. Women screamed until their throats tore. A boy no older than 12 bit another just to crawl an inch closer. No one looked back. No one noticed the faded cloak brushing against the dust as its wearer slipped quietly out of the frenzy. The woman moved at a pace almost insulting, slow, deliberate. Each step measured, as if she were listening to a rhythm no one else could hear. Behind her, the sound of ambition thundered louder. The clash of will against will, greed against greed. Ahead of her, silence stretched like an open road. She entered an alley where the sunlight broke into shards. The market stalls were abandoned. Coins scattered across the ground from merchants who had run to the plaza. Gold, silver, copper, all left behind, as if worthless compared to the promise of the idol. She didn't bend to pick up a single coin. Her sandals pressed on, steady. For years, she had listened to the whispers of gold. She had watched how men changed when they touched it. Their smiles turned sharp, their eyes restless, their laughter hollow. She had seen families torn apart because one brother gained gold and the other did not. She had seen neighbors glare at one another with envy so heavy it poisoned their bread and water. Gold made promises, but she had lived long enough to see how those promises decayed. The woman was not born fearless. She too once dreamed of the idol, of escaping hunger, of silencing the endless worry that weighed on her nights. But hunger taught her something. Worry taught her something. That a stomach filled by gold today would be empty again tomorrow. That a name carved in records would one day be forgotten in dust. That nothing the idol gave could quiet the questions in her heart. And so, while the city worshipped the golden shine, she turned her back on it. The alley spat her out into the desert road. The horizon stretched wide, barren, endless, and free. For the first time in her life, she felt weightless. The idol gleamed behind her, calling her like a siren. But she did not turn back, not even once. The desert road was cruel. Heat pressed down like a hand that would not lift. Sand shifted beneath each step, turning the simplest walk into a battle. The air itself shimmered, as though mocking her choice with illusions of water. Behind her, the city roared, not with voices, but with the sound of 1,000 hearts beating against one another in pursuit of gold. Every cry carried over the walls like a wave crashing in an endless tide, and still she walked. At first, her steps were heavy. Doubt gnawed at her heels like a dog that refused to be shaken off. What if you are a fool? What if the gold could have saved you? What if you will starve tomorrow while they feast? The voices were not her own, but echoes of every man, woman and child who had laughed at her small dreams, pitied her frayed cloak, pitied her hands scarred by labor. For a moment, her legs faltered. The temptation to turn back whispered sweetly, "You could still run. The idol is still there. The crowd is still fighting, but if you hurry, if you push hard enough, you might yet touch it." Her breath caught. Sweat dripped into her eyes. She closed them tight. And then, in that dark silence, another voice spoke. Not a whisper of doubt, but a steady murmur, like water hidden deep beneath the sand. Gold will not change who you are, but walking away might. Her feet steadied, her breathing slowed. She opened her eyes again, and though the desert stretched endless and merciless, she felt her weight lessen. She walked on. Every step was a choice. Every step was an answer to the world's question. Do you worship what glitters, or do you search for what endures? By the time night fell, she had crossed the horizon. The city lights were faint sparks in the distance, like a memory fading into the dark. And for the first time, she smiled. Because she knew there are some journeys you cannot make by running towards something, only by walking away. The desert was not empty. It only seemed that way to those who passed through it with greedy eyes, looking only for quick water or glittering stone. But for the woman who walked with nothing, the desert revealed everything. On the second day, when the heat pressed like fire and her lips cracked from thirst, she found shade beneath a rock outcrop. It was there she noticed the small things. A cactus splitting itself open to reveal a drop of life. An insect dragging a crumb 10 times its size. The sky, not golden, but vast, infinite, humbling. These were not treasures to sell, but they were treasures that taught. On the third day, when hunger gnawed her stomach hollow, she came across a wandering shepherd. He offered her bread, coarse and rough, and a flask of water. She asked why he would share with a stranger. He smiled and said, "Because I know what it feels like to be hungry." His words weighed more than the bread in her hand, for in the city, she had seen men with vaults of grain walk past beggars who starved at their gates. Gold had silenced compassion. But here, on this forgotten road, kindness still breathed. On the fourth day, she reached the edge of a forgotten village. The houses were made of clay, their walls cracked, their roofs patched with straw. No gold glimmered here, no jewels hung from doorways. And yet, laughter rose from the courtyards. Children played in the dust with sticks and stones, and their joy rang louder than the drums of any palace feast. She asked an old woman tending a fire how they could laugh with so little. The old woman answered, "Because we still belong to one another." Her heart trembled. She remembered the city, where neighbors lived wall against wall, but hearts were separated by envy, where brothers ceased to speak because one had touched the idol and the other had not. Here, where there was no gold, there was unity. Day after day, step after step, the path revealed its secrets. Not in riches, not in crowns, but in truths that cannot be bought. That hunger teaches empathy. That silence teaches listening. That absence teaches presence. The further she walked, the lighter her soul became. And though she carried nothing in her hands, she carried everything she was learning in her spirit. By the end of the seventh day, she realized something profound. The idol gave wealth to the body, but walking away from it had given wealth to her soul. The woman never returned to the city, but her story did. Whispers of her choice traveled faster than caravans. At first they mocked her. She walked away from fortune. She is a fool. Then the tone shifted. She walked away from fortune, but she is still alive, still content, still smiling. By the time her name reached the lips of strangers, it was no longer mockery. It was mystery. And from her journey, 5 truths remained. Truths heavier than gold, yet weightless to carry. Lesson 1. Not all that glitters is gain. The idol gave wealth. That was true. But it also took. It took peace, kindness, and the ability to look another in the eye without envy. The woman's life became proof of a haunting truth. Sometimes what looks like fortune is the beginning of ruin. Sometimes the prize you chase costs more than it gives. She taught the world to ask, what am I trading for the shine I seek? Lesson 2. Hunger is a teacher, not an enemy. She knew poverty. She had felt the ache of empty stomachs and sleepless nights. But instead of letting hunger break her, she let it shape her. From hunger, she learned empathy. From thirst, she learned gratitude. From lack, she learned to see the value of little things. Her lesson was clear. Do not curse the seasons of lack. They carve into you the very space where wisdom will grow. Lesson 3. Kindness survives where gold fails. In the desert, a stranger gave her bread when he had little to spare. In the village, families with cracked roofs shared joy louder than the wealthiest mansions. She realized that kindness breathes strongest where gold is weakest. When hands are empty, hearts must remain full. Her legacy whispered, "The richest are not those who hoard, but those who give what little they have." Lesson 4. Belonging is the true wealth in the city, where everyone worshipped the idol. Men and women lived like rivals. But in the village of clay, they lived like kin. The woman understood. To have gold and no one to trust is to be poorer than the poorest. But to have love, loyalty, and laughter, that is wealth the idol could never forge. Her story asked, "What is the use of holding treasure if you cannot share a meal?" Lesson 5. Walking away is sometimes the bravest step. Most people believed courage meant running into the fight, reaching for the prize, seizing the crown. But she showed another kind of courage. The courage to turn your back when the world demands you kneel. The courage to walk a path no one understands. The courage to refuse the lie that gold is everything. Her final gift was not gold, but freedom. For the greatest treasure she found was not wealth, not power, not applause, but the quiet strength to choose her own way. And so, her legacy lived not in statues or songs, but in a question that still lingers wherever ambition blinds the heart. What will you walk away from, so you can finally walk toward what matters?